5 players who I believe are going to have incredible second half of the season under John Eustace at Derby County. And if they don't, Derby County are in for some huge problems. You'll probably know by the thumbnail a couple of the players on this list, but we're going to start off with one of the least probably mentioned players over the course of the last few weeks, and that is Marcus Harness. Now, a lot of people don't really like Marcus Harness, and I completely understand the reason why. I completely understand that, in my opinion, I also agree. I don't think he's been good enough. But in a Paul Warne setup for a technical player like Harness, I just don't think he ever really got into his proper position and was ever really able to play the way that he wanted to. Now, Derby County have a massive issue with wingers and number 10s / creative players in this team, and I certainly believe that over the course of the next few weeks, he could become one of the most important players for Derby County. And that is all going to be down to the style of play that John Eustace chooses to adopt. Now, obviously, I'm not saying we're going to come out and score 10, 15, 20 goals over the course of the next few weeks, although that would be absolutely lovely. But I do believe that we are going to see a completely different creative side to this team, and that's where I believe Marcus Harness is going to get some plaudits and some flowers for Derby County, because he is very good on the ball, and I know a lot of people aren't really massive fans of Harness, but for me, I think he does have just that little bit of a spark, that little bit of quality that we do need. And whether it will come from the left-hand side, the right-hand side, through the middle, I couldn't tell you right now. We're going to have to see John Eustace in action, whether that be tomorrow night versus QPR, or tonight as you're watching this, or even next weekend versus Millwall. We've obviously got 14 cup finals to see, but I do believe that a player like Marcus Harness is going to benefit massively from the introduction of John Eustace and the change of play style. There's another player who I think is going to take a massive leap forward, and that falls on the shoulders of Nathaniel Mendez-Laing. Now, if Derby County can get on the ball and get him in 1v1 situations, we are in for a real treat. And in my opinion, this also falls on to the next player on the list, which is Caden Jackson. I think those two players in those wide areas, if you get them in 1v1s or you get them running into the channels, I think we could have some real serious issues for opposition defenders over the course of the next few weeks. And players like Mendez-Laing and Caden Jackson have suffered a lot this season with a lack of confidence. Neither player ever really got going. Caden Jackson scored a couple early doors, then didn't score for a while, and then scored another one, and then was in and out of the team. Mendez-Laing, in my opinion, never got going at all this season. I'm not sure how many goals or assists he's on. I know he's been taking set pieces, so his assist numbers will be a little bit elevated compared to others on the squad, but they're two players for me who, once they find their confidence, if you get them into those 1v1 situations, you get them running past defenders, whether it's with the ball or without the ball, they can cause some serious problems. But the only way that Derby County are going to be able to make that happen is within the midfield. And that's where we go on to the final 2 players in this video. And we're going to start off with a player called David Ozo. We all know what David Ozo can bring to this team, and we all know how impressive he has been across the course of his appearances this season, even including the other night versus Oxford United, where, yes, he was a little bit static, but I think that's more to do with the formation we was playing in comparison to that of the way he actually plays. Because if we go back to those games versus Bristol City, Cardiff, I'm not sure if he played the QPR game, but that might have been his last game. Whichever game it was before he picked up those injuries, he played some really important performances and really good games where you sort of saw a different side to David Ozo. It took him a couple of games to sort of build up to the Championship and the level that he needs to be performing at. But once he hit it, he was unbelievable. And the way that he can utilise his body to move the ball and keep defenders away from the ball was very good. And that's something which we're going to need to see under John Eustace. Now, I spoke a couple of times across the course of the last few weeks about John Eustace's style of play and how he really needs a dictator who can sit and get on the ball. We obviously then get a destroyer in Ibu Adams, and I think David Ozo and Ibu Adams are sort of a great partnership in that sort of double pivot role, but it will be interesting to see how John Eustace chooses to use them, because for me, David Ozo is going to be that perfect player to link the defence into the midfield, into the front 3 or front 4, whether we play a 10 or with just a front 3 in like a 4-3-3 situation. And that's going to be very interesting to see. And that also then links into the next player on this list, which is the final player I'm going to be discussing in this video, and he goes by the name of Kenzo Houdmine. A really, really good player in my opinion. There's so much that this lad can achieve if he's given the ball at his feet in good positions. We saw it earlier in the season when he had the protection of David Ozo and Ibu Adams behind him, and he could make those third man runs into the box, make those delayed runs into the box. I think it was against Cardiff where he scored that tap in from the edge of the box. And it's one of those for me where since sort of David Ozo picked up that injury, it sort of felt as if Kenzo has been the one that has always been made to do the going out to the wide players, going out to the wide areas and sort of picking up that ball. And if you go and look at his heat map, it will show you that he spent a lot of his time this season on that right hand side in sort of like a right back position or right wing back position, which ultimately I think we all know for a midfielder is not where they want to be. So the important thing for me is getting a player like Kenzo centrally, as central as possible, to get on the ball, get in between the lines and sort of make things happen. Now, I'm not saying that Kenzo Houdmine is going to go and pick up 5, 6, 7 assists over the course of the next few weeks, but if we can build some confidence into that midfield, especially into Kenzo Houdmine, I certainly think he's going to cause some real problems for defences, and hopefully that can start off tomorrow night versus QPR. Now, the big question will be is how are all these players going to improve? Now, the big thing that I always think has been massive to talk about this season is the play style. The whole wide and cross situation isn't good for confidence for the wingers, because if you're putting in bad balls, it's a bad situation, and Paul Warne didn't like it. If you're a wing back putting in those crosses, Paul Warne doesn't like it, and you can't. There's no sort of really pattern of play. There's no sort of build-up element, and that is when you then talk about those players in the midfield, your Kenzos, your Ozos, your Harnesses, who want to get on the ball and want to make things happen. And we now will hopefully see that happen, and that's the important thing, is getting that ball down on the floor in a back four, getting the ball going side to side, forwards and backwards. You've got to do that to build up in possession. And the big question will be is how long is it going to take for fans to get annoyed at possessive football and controlling displays and things like that, because that is what we will probably be seeing when it comes to in possession. People are going to complain about the sideways passes. They're going to. It's going to happen. But you've got to stick with the process. You need those sideways passes to open up those spaces in the forward line and in that midfield. If you go and watch the game from Tuesday night, I'm not saying we did it great on Tuesday night, but there was certainly a much seen improvement from that style of play under Paul Warne. But going side to side, delaying your passes, pulling out a striker, pulling out a winger, pulling a midfielder a little bit deeper, it opens up them holes in the midfield and in those forward lines for players to either drop into or to bolt off and go into the channels. And that is what Derby County really need to see, and it's what we're going to see, in my opinion, especially with a hold-up striker as good as Lars Jørgen Selvesen. The important thing will be getting him another goal, getting the likes of Kenzo, Caden Jackson and Mendez-Laing back on that assist chart, back on the goals chart, to really sort of boost their confidence. It's going to be really interesting to see how Derby do play later today versus QPR. You can have your say down in the comments. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, hit the like button as well, and I'll catch you later on after the QPR game.